Welcome back to the What You More podcast. I'm your host, Quinton Harris. You're dialed in for episode 250. Man, I never thought this one would come when we first started this. In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the headlines that are continuing to mislead consumers, mainly what is going on with the new listings, where's the demand, and can you believe most of the lock-in effect right now is taking place at 6%. That and more in this episode of What's Your One More. All right, so welcome back to the show here on 250 episode. We got a special one on deck for you. Come 251. One of my favorite guests. Let's face it, all my guests are my favorite guests, but this one's been back for 3 times. This is going to be Dan Habib from MBS Highway coming on. We're going to discuss a lot of what's going on in the future of mortgages as well as crypto. Dan is an expert in crypto and an expert when it comes to understanding the Federal Reserve and the bond market. Very excited for that on this next episode. But till then, let's dive right into this one. So, hey, let's talk about some of the headlines that are going on right now. There are a tremendous amount of the doomers coming out. Yeah, I like to talk about these people, the doomers, the doom and gloom or the doom porn people coming out. I mean, these dudes have been at it for like 13 years wrong. Every time, wrong again. But now the premise of this, fall apart exercise as they talk about real estate is that there's so many new listings. There's just an abundance of people coming to the market that have to sell. They're having to sell. Things are falling apart. I would say that that's inherently wrong for the most part. Yeah, you're going to have people that, are going to have issues. They're going to have short sales. But these are far and few between. The foreclosure rates are far and few between. Many different things right now, far few in between to isolate that one particular topic matter of a, foreclosures are less than, nationwide, less than 1%. You've got that, some pockets could be more, right? And same thing with short sales. And to use that as a headline is kind of misleading, but also, leveraging the fact that many new listings and active listings are at the market is a bad thing is pretty ironic. Because let me back up. In 2008, our new listings each week got to almost like 350,000. We're not even at 80,000 per week right now. So to kind of use this bandwidth knowledge of this market's coming to a halt is kind of ignorant. Let's just call it what it is. It's ignorant. And it comes with no backing. But let me kind of share something with you that I think is interesting. We've got a lot of new listings, yet we have 22 weeks of positive mortgage application prints. Every Wednesday from the MBA, which is the Mortgage Bankers Association, we get this wonderful index It called Mortgage Application Index, and they separate into purchases and refinance, and then they give you an overall index indicating on a weekly basis how much mortgage applications are going up or down based on a percentage from the previous week. We have 22 positive prints, meaning we have 22 weeks of increased mortgage applications. Now, you could argue that's demand in the market. You could even point to the fact that, hey, that's a lot of people applying for both refinances and purchases. Why is that not showing up in the forms of transactions? Meaning, why aren't these people all closing? They're highly interested. Is it the rates that deter them? Is it the price? I think it's a combination of those things, plus this one. With all these new listings coming to the market, don't you think if you were a home buyer, you wouldn't just arbitrarily list their home unless you knew you could buy another home? So in theory, with more listings coming to the market, you should see mortgage applications go up because those people that are selling are usually becoming a buyer in another location. So they need to know they're qualified. So applications are going up. But here's the interesting thing. They're eventually going to connect. And they're going to connect whether the rate market goes up or down, because what we found out between the end of 22 and all of 25, these mortgage ranges between 6 and 8% didn't stop transactions from happening. They still happened. They weren't even record lows. They were in line with the standard years that we would normally see. So even with all of the rates, it still showed us there's a demand level there. There's another thing that we're uncovering right now. We're starting to see the data and the results come in. A year ago, even 2 years ago, I was sitting on this platform talking about the lock-in effect. I even had pie charts showing where the mortgages were locked in and what interest rates were tied to the national homeowners. Interesting stat. Of all the homeowners in the United States, of all of them, we're now 40% of those are free and clear. 40%. That's interesting to me that 40% of them, and 82.6% of all mortgages in the United States have an equity position of 30% or greater, meaning that they only owe 70% of the value of their home or less then that is a huge differential between 2008 for all the doomers out there. It is a huge differential. And, I've seen people come to our site and come to our YouTube channel at What's Your One More with the number one, and they've argued, by the way, if you're not subscribing to that, please go do that. We put a lot of favorable charts in there. Charlie, my producer, does a fantastic job of putting a lot of great graphics in the channel there. And I think it's something that if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, definitely appreciate it. Please give us a 5-star review, but make that switch over to YouTube. Check it out. Hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you guys check us out on there and give us your feedback. But some of the feedback we're getting are people going, oh yeah, but that equity, it's just false inflation. And, we can't sustain this. But we have, right? That's the funny part. We've sustained it. If you're going to subscribe to the idea that the real estate world's going to collapse, go back to 2005, maybe even late 2004. You could see the collapse of the credit market starting to happen. You could see the increase in bankruptcies being filed 2 to 3 years before it happened in 2008. So let's rewind to 2022, 3 years ago from today. Well, we know we were having one of the biggest, I guess you could say, economic meltdowns with inflation and interest rates making the rise they did, adjustments from the Federal Reserve. And 3 years from that date, we should see this quote unquote collapse, but we didn't. And we're not going to. And that's because it's a different market. The credit rules from the creditors are different. The credit acceptance is far tighter. The guidelines are far greater. The due diligence is being done. Those things are not going to happen. So the question is, can we sustain the current price points that we're at? Well, yeah, we're seeing price drops in area, but we're not seeing catastrophic drops. And you're also not even getting near the 2019 levels that you had received during COVID. Because during COVID in 2020, 2021, 2022, even parts of 2022, you got massive gains. So even if you're seeing, 5% drop, 3% drop in prices. I mean, in Florida, we're just now starting to see prices drop a little, not significantly, but a little. Now, again, there's pockets. I understand what some of the people are going to say. But overall, you're still seeing Florida hold the line on that where we're located. Other states are going to be different. But my point with that is even with these equity positions that you have, you can absorb that as a seller. Interestingly enough, when we look at that lock-in effect, going back to that, what's interesting to me is that on the lock-in effect, wasn't maybe 2 years ago, the bulk of the loans were 4% or less. Now you're seeing 6% show up. 6% is the dominant number. So there might not even be a lock-in effect anymore. People may have sold their homes and unlocked. There was this theology that people were just going to refinance. I still think there's a large refinance wave coming through, very large coming through. Matter of fact, we've seen from CoreLogic reports talk about over $4 trillion worth of refinances that are going to be done over the course of the next year and a half. So you're still going to see that kind of impact happen there from those lock-ins. But it's not what it once was. And so where I'm getting at with that is that the world didn't stop. Transactions didn't stop. The doomers are wrong again. Deals are getting done. And people are buying homes. They're selling their current home, buying another home. Today's episode is brought to you by Texana Bank Mortgage. They're coming to the table with a revolutionary product. It's called REMLO, Real Estate Mortgage Loan Officer. And what they are doing is they are taking real estate agents and they're taking loan officers. And for the first time in history, they're putting them together under one umbrella. They're actually taking two industries right now that sit on top of each other, and they're putting them together and backing it by a full service bank licensed in all 50 states. So imagine this, you're not just an agent anymore, you're a full service agent. You're the single trusted point of contact for your client in this entire process. You're seeing the loan and the home search front to end. It's going to change the dynamic of real estate and mortgage lending together. Now, if you're a real estate agent, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go to askaboutremlo.com. That's askaboutremlo.com. Because what you're going to find there are significant details about this program, how to enroll, and how to gather more information. So if you're ready to adapt and thrive, go to askaboutremlo.com. That's askaboutremlo.com. You know, I thought this last week we had the momentum in all of our favors. There were so many things in line. You know, my guest next week, next episode is Dan Habib. We're recording that episode on Thursday. He and I were talking, and he said, Q, man, everything is lining up to where if we get some good prints on the job reports, meaning ADP comes in favorable, and the BLS comes in favorable, he's like, dude, it is going to send a massive win for the mortgage rates and in the bond market. And so everything was falling in line. Boom, we had a good ADP report. I think the report was supposed to come in at 95,000 jobs in the private sector. It was negative 33,000. Now, that's not good if you're looking to get a job, but meaning from a mortgage rate standpoint, that negative print was very important. And then we had jobless claims that were in line on Thursday. And then we were waiting on that, on Wednesday. And then we were waiting on that BLS report. And the thing about the BLS report was that we were waiting on that on Thursday because it was July 4th. Usually it comes out on Friday. July 4th was Friday. We were waiting on that report to come in. And everyone is anticipating for it to come in expectations line or a little less. And it came over. And when it came over, it was kind of like, oh man, the one domino we needed there didn't fall. Like, I feel like that's the third or fourth time in 3 years that's happened. How could that happen, right? I mean, the Biden administration caught a lot of shit. Let's call it for what it is, for all these inflated government jobs that popped up. And now we're seeing that happening under a report under the Trump administration. You're probably sure Trump was scratching his head going, how the hell did that happen? So when you look at the government sector on the BLS report, because the private sector was down, you look at the government sector, what was interesting is all the jobs came from state and local and jobs, meaning that those are like, teachers, police officers, like those are all state and local jobs showing up. Community jobs, they're all state funded there. That wasn't federal jobs showing up. And I'm not defending that by any means, but I'm saying that was one of those where it was like, you didn't see that one coming. You can even go back over this time year over year. That's not usually that big a jump during that time. It was deflating, and the bond market quickly took to selling and retreated. And that sucked because we had significant momentum in our way. And a lot of people thought that if that print came in less than expected, the Federal Reserve would be having no choice than to proceed with a rate cut. And now you got this kind of situation where Powell and company, and maybe they're not part of that shadow Fed that I talked about last episode, but they were sitting back on their heels going, all right, now we don't really have to do anything. We can wait. We can wait and see. So in the July meeting, we'll wait. We'll roll into September and we'll see what happens. And I think that is not the win we wanted in the rate market, because what was happening right now is spreads are getting better. You've heard me talk about that over and again, the 10-year versus the mortgage 30-year fix, what that spread looks like. That's been retreating. We had a lot of positive momentum on the 10-year yield, and just it all evaporated immediately. The spreads are still getting better, but that evaporated, and that was a little bit of a bummer, because where that was heading was below 6.5 to stay down around that 6.25 and give us some really good momentum to finish out the peak season, because we're in peak season right now. And we probably got 2 more weeks of peak season, and that would have been ideal. So now the question becomes, what does fourth quarter look like? Can fourth quarter provide that peak season? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on this, especially if the Federal Reserve does start making those cuts in September as suggested. And maybe they surprise us in July. But the odds are they're probably not going to do anything based on those last couple of prints, and the fact that they're still tied into the fact they think inflation is going to be something more than what it is currently. So I will say this. We're going to have some in-depth forecast with Dan on the show. We're going to talk about stablecoin and why that's tied to the 10-year treasury and what that can do for the 10-year treasury and what that can do for the bond market. We're going to talk about a little bit of crypto and what's going on in the market. We're definitely going to talk about the Federal Reserve. We're going to talk about mortgage interest rates, and we're going to talk about what has to change in 2025 heading into 2026, and why, even no matter what the news headlines say right now, the market that we're in for real estate and mortgages is still on track for what we would call par. It's still a normal market, even though it doesn't feel like that. And we'll kind of break that down in more in the next episode. So if you haven't subscribed yet, go to our YouTube channel. Check us out at What's Your One More with the number 1. Also, check us out on Apple and Spotify. We'd love to get your feedback. 5-star review us on that. This is a little quicker episode because the next one you're going to get with Dan and I is probably going to be over an hour. So look forward to seeing you at the next episode at What's Your One More.
I got one more shot, I'm going to make it. One more chance, I'm going to take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life to live, so I put my all into it, yeah.